Me, Chris.
Yeah, we've had a lot of great conversations, a lot of hours on Clubhouse, kind of back in the day. Not so much now because it's kind of pulled back a little bit, but I think going back to like November, December, we spent a lot of time on there, a lot of cool conversations.
Yeah, I mean, Clubhouse was a really special place, especially at that time, because there are very few users on, so you could access like people of very high quality at that specific time on Clubhouse, which made it a really cool app.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we're live, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and on Twitch. If you're jumping on live and you have a question for us, feel free to jump in. We want this to be a conversation. Drew's got an awesome story. I want to give a little bit of context about your background and how you found Bitcoin and kind of how you landed on Unchained. You've got a really awesome story. So if you would just give us a background and we'll kind of go from there, man.
Yeah, so I found Bitcoin kind of during the 2017 bull run. A good friend of mine kind of introduced me to crypto Twitter and kind of the community that was being built. I at first was a skeptic, like most people are, and kind of eventually fell down the rabbit hole, read a few pieces like the VJ Boyapati piece. Matt Huang's paper is really great, and kind of just fell in love, right? This is 2017, of course. I was kind of a freshman in college at the time. I didn't have a lot of money, so what I did is I took a lot of my scholarship money and just aped into Bitcoin, right? And during 2017, you're looking like a genius for about like a week, and then it goes from like 20,000 to 8,000. You're like, oh shit, right? And so that was kind of my introduction to Bitcoin. I've kind of been around the space since then, and have just been going deeper and deeper, right? I personally write about Bitcoin here and there. I have a starter pack on my website, which I highly recommend to people that are new to Bitcoin. Kind of my favorite pieces that I've read. And yeah, since then I've kind of meandered my way. I tried dropping out of college to let my dad just take my tuition money and buy Bitcoin. Of course, that did not go over well with your traditional Indian parents. And then, yeah, Clubhouse came around in kind of my senior year. I dropped most of my homework and just started talking on Clubhouse and within rooms. This is kind of where I met you, American Hodl, Jay, Kaylee, like a lot of our Clubhouse friends from back in the day. And it's funny, American Hodl actually has a big role in me being at Unchained.
Yeah, can you talk about the story? It's awesome.
Yeah, so I was speaking in a bunch of rooms. I got added to the Master Bitcoin Club on Clubhouse, and we're speaking in a private room on like a Wednesday night. And Hollow goes, "Hey, Dhruv, I'm flying to Austin tomorrow to go to the BitDevs meetup. You should come down, and I'll introduce you to the Unchained team." And I'm like, "All right, screw it. I'll spend most of my bank account just going to Austin because some random pseudonymous person online told me to."
Because you didn't know what he looked like.
Because he had some random avatar. I was like, I have no idea what this guy looks like. I have no idea how old he is. I have no idea like what he does, what he looks like. Nothing. I just was told to go to Austin because he would intro me to the team. I was like, all right, screw it. I booked my ticket Wednesday night, fly out Thursday morning, get to Austin and go to this BitDevs meetup. And this is back in January. And I walk in and I'm looking around. There's probably about like 35, 40 people in the room. And I'm just kind of meandering my way through. And finally, I hear this voice that sounds like American Hodl.
Because you're on Clubhouse. Obviously, that's the way you identify people. It's just audio. So.
and yeah, it's incredible. He's literally just standing there. I'm like, wow, that's not what I expected, right? And he introduces me to the entire Unchained team: Parker Lewis, Michael, Will Cole, and I kind of just hang out with them at this outhouse the entire weekend. And there's a funny story. So, I mean, this was, of course, my first time meeting Parker, and this is the weekend of McGregor and
sure.
Yeah, so it was just a McGregor fight. I forget who he's fighting. Me and Parker are just doing degenerate bets. I bet him like $150 on a fight before, and it's like we're just going back and forth.
You and Parker, you said?
Parker Lewis.
Yeah, you and Parker.
Yeah. We kind of end up even on the night, but it's kind of funny. That was kind of my introduction to hanging out with Parker. It was just degen, like
just betting on some UFC, casually. Yeah. Your casual UFC bet.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, it was just a super fun trip. I mean, I didn't land a job being there, and I was like, crap, I just kind of spent most of my bank account being here. But I mean, it panned out. I mean, they eventually raised a Series A from NYDIG. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we raised about $30 million, and then I sent a kind of an email to Parker and Michael, and they got me the job, and here I am. I'm working at a Bitcoin company, and there's probably nothing else that I really wanted to do.
That's awesome. Like just following your passion. Like we just talked about before we jumped on here, like if you really enjoy and love something, do whatever it takes to get involved. And so you just straight up are just like, yep, I'm going to get a plane ticket, American HODL. I don't know what he looks like, but I'm going to go try to find him. And then you find him. That's just awesome, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's been quite a journey, right? Like, I mean, with Bitcoin, you have these ups and downs, especially during the cycles, but I mean, if you stick it out, there's something rewarding really to it.
Yeah, and just one of the things, just the community. There is nothing else like it I have ever seen for something like that, right? Because you had the faith to say, I'm going to go down there. I want to do this. I believe in it so much. I'm going to go down there. I have no idea who I'm even looking for. You're going to go do that because of something you believe in. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, this you can feel this also through your content, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. Like some of your writing. I think that's important to bring up because I think a lot of people from the outside don't understand that about Bitcoin. They just see it as like complete speculation, and they don't see the layer of community and how connected people are. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that like Bitcoin specifically is a cult, but there is definitely a strong believer or just like a set of believers within Bitcoin. And Mark Andreessen had this talk where he pretty much said is you want to invest in cults, and it's kind of just like okay, you invest in assets people strongly believe in. And with Bitcoin, there are strong believers in the monetary policy that Bitcoin really brings. And so when I saw that, I was like, I need to go all in. Like this is something that there are true believers in, and the US dollar just doesn't seem like the same as it used to be, right? And I mean, for me, it's like Bitcoin is that. There's so many strong believers. There's so many people that will help you and guide you through this journey of understanding Bitcoin, and that's truly inspirational, right? And I mean, working on the concierge desk at Unchained, this is what we specifically focus on, right? Granted, we do focus on multi-sig, but we really want to push forward that client education side for like through webinars and eventually podcasts, right? Justine and Tyler Campbell are kind of running that end. So it's super awesome because we get to sit down with clients, kind of talk through Bitcoin, talk about multi-sig and kind of what we do.
Yeah, let's shift to Unchained. For someone that hasn't heard of Unchained Capital, what does Unchained do? I have to say right out of the gate, like I love Unchained. I've used Unchained for, I think it's my 5th month. That the entire experience has been really positive. So I want to just give a shout out to the team. But just for someone that's heard of Unchained Capital or just didn't quite know what it is or what they offer, like what is Unchained Capital?
Yeah. So if I had to put Unchained in a specific category, I would say we offer Bitcoin native financial services, right? That's kind of our slogan. That's kind of our go-to, right? What we offer within that is that we offer multi-sig accounts. So multi-signature. For those of you that don't know what multi-sig is, imagine you have a house and you have 3 different keys and you need 2 keys to get into the house, right? And what this does is it reduces the single key dependency that a lot of Bitcoin wallets have today. And this might not seem like a big thing to people that hold small amounts of Bitcoin, but I mean, you think about the value that Bitcoin will eventually create. Even if you hold a small amount of Bitcoin today, it can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future. And storing it correctly and being able to pass it down generation to generation is super, super important, right? So what multi-sig essentially does is that it reduces the single key dependency, which honestly, we see a lot of single keys be compromised, right? So if you have a vault in your house, someone gets in your house, or if you're on your computer, right, someone hacks your computer, gets your key, right? Like this is very scary instances, and when you're handling hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially on on Bitcoin, right, you lose it, you'll never get it back, right? And that's a very similar property to gold. You lose it, there's no customer service line to call, right? So we pride ourselves on helping people take the best security measures within their Bitcoin. And then kind of what separates us from other competitors is that we offer financial services on top of it, right? Today we offer Bitcoin-backed loans, which is incredibly important because you don't have to pay capital gains tax. You merely borrow against your Bitcoin, right? And we also have an OTC desk, which we facilitate large trades over about $50,000 in specific states. So our multi-sig accounts are completely free. If you're interested in securing your Bitcoin, and I would say the safest way to store your Bitcoin, you can go through our concierge desk, and we kind of walk you through an onboarding session and help you kind of get started with multi-sig.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about kind of like the progression. So someone, is on an exchange, they buy Bitcoin. It's really interesting to me that there's like this chasm between buying on an exchange and then self-custodying your Bitcoin, right? Because in theory, it sounds simple. It's like, okay, you just buy it on exchange and then self-custody. Like I just said it in one sentence, but you've got but it's much more, in depth than that. And it's like anything else. It's like riding a bike. It's like learning a sport. Like once you've got to get active and learn it and really want to learn it. I don't know if that makes sense, but because that is not your Bitcoin. If you leave it on an exchange, that is not your Bitcoin, right? Not your keys, not your coin, not your coin, whatever you want to say, right? So you've got to pull it off and then self-custody your monetary energy, like your value, because if not, someone else is holding it for you. And how is that any different than a bank, right? And so that's important, but it's really interesting. I don't have the numbers, but how many people leave their value on an exchange and they're not bothered by it? I mean, I've got new coiner friends that's what they do. They leave it on a Cash App. They leave it on whatever exchange they're using. So talk about like what's happened in the last six to 9 months. Or ever since you've been with Unchained, but just like what you've heard from people that more and more are starting to do this.
Yeah.
And actually custody it.
So something I'll speak to is that if you don't hold the keys, it's not your Bitcoin, right? Effectively, if you look at the infrastructure bill that was just proposed, right? They originally had the non-custodians also in there, but they removed that because we don't handle any of our clients' funds, right? When you come to Unchained, you hold 2 out of 3 keys, right? So we don't have the ability to move your funds anywhere. When you think about custodians and of course exchanges like Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, right? They have the ability to move your funds anywhere, right? So you're going to see much more restrictions on these exchanges, right? You're going to see the government kind of continuing to crack down on these exchanges, and you'll see more self-custody kind of happening. So I think when we think about Bitcoin custody as a whole, you will see more people custodying themselves, and especially the much safer way of using a custodial multisig, right? Or just using multisig as a whole. So some clients that I've talked to, right? A lot of people don't really understand custody when they first begin, but eventually they understand like, okay, this Bitcoin is priceless and I need to custody it myself. So they'll start with ledgers or Trezors and they'll begin that way, right? Which is the first step, right? That being said, like when we think about custody, right, it's super important to mention that today, like we don't have a lot of education on how to custody Bitcoin correctly, right? Like we do have these clubhouse rooms, these places where you can kind of understand, but you want to be able to have the education on that, right? There's this information silo. And that's kind of where I see Unchained helping out, right? So we think about multi-sig wallets, right? We have custodial multi-sig, and then we also have a product called Caravan. And this is super, super important because custodial multi-sig, we hold 1 key. With Caravan, you can create your own multi-sig if you have three wallets, so 3 Trezors, ledgers, cold cards, right? And not have Unchained see any of the custodial any of the multi-sig that you're creating or the specific multi-sig that you are creating. So at Unchained, we align ourselves with the Bitcoin ethos of, okay, if Bitcoin is the open current, or if Bitcoin is the currency of the internet, right, you should be able to do whatever you need to without having a custodian. That's why Caravan is super, super important. It's that, okay, if you don't want to have someone see or say, okay, like this is how much like Bitcoin I'm custodying with Unchained, I don't feel safe because there is a third party that, or there is a second party that's holding a key. You can use Caravan, which is something that we've developed to help people not have to go through custodial multi-sig. Instead, they just build a multi-sig vault themselves, right? So kind of back to your point, it's like when like custodying Bitcoin today is incredibly difficult. I think people don't really understand it at a high level. I think that as Bitcoin continues to grow in value, there are going to be more and more people that come to multi-sig, and that's why our multi-sig accounts at Unchained are technically free, right? You don't have to come through the concierge desk. You don't have to pay us anything. You bring 2 ledgers or 2 Trezors to Unchained, and you can build the vault yourself. And we believe at Unchained that multi-sig vaults are going to be like checking accounts, right? You can come and build a checking account. It'll be totally free. There are no fees on this multi-sig account. And we monetize through financial services if you ever need them. So Unchained kind of has this long-term focus of where we want to onboard as many Bitcoiners and as many Bitcoin clients today, because in the long run, Bitcoin is going up in value. So the higher AUM we have, the better it is.
Also, I just thought too, I think because I run MyNode on MyNode, so shout out to the MyNode team. There was a Caravan application that was recently released on there. I don't have the information in front of me, but I did see the application on the stack on MyNode. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you have any information about the Caravan being available on MyNode? Or is that, I think it's fairly new.
I personally am not familiar with that. But to give you maybe a brief description of Caravan, sure. It's our open source tool where you can pretty much just go in and create your own multi-sig using a few like a few wallets. And you don't have Unchained seeing anything. You don't have anyone seeing anything. It's just simply Bitcoin native and created within Caravan, right? So what Caravan does for us and I guess the entire community is if Unchained magically disappears one day, you can take your keys and unlock your Bitcoin using Caravan, because you can just self-host it on GitHub, or you can just pretty much just use multi-sig anywhere, right? So Unchained is separate from multi-sig, right? We offer multi-sig services, but we also have an open source product where if anything happens to us, you have access to your coin.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for explaining that. And again, it is, I think it's fairly new where the application stack is on MyNode, because I did see that.
Yeah. I haven't played around within MyNode yet. So, yeah. I mean, Buck or Tyler would probably be the ones to ask about that.
Yeah, because I've recently started working on Lightning Node and routing and all that good stuff. I'm starting to learn more about that. It's always a process. So, but that was cool. I saw Caravan on there. So, well, hey, thanks for everybody jumping on and listening live. There was a couple. We want to grab some questions. So I want to try to go through here and pull some questions here. If you have questions for us, really about any topics, I wanted Drew to talk about Unchained, what the team's doing, what's happened in the last 6 to 12 months. I did want to talk a little bit about your content. And before we do that, though, I want to grab a couple of questions here. It just kind of leads into some of your articles. I think Patrick had a pretty good question here from LinkedIn. So if Bitcoin is independent of currency in the established market, why does the price go up and down with the market it's replacing?
Well, so when you think about Bitcoin, right, it's no different from any other float currency today, right? I think about money as the purest form of supply demand, or like the purest experiment of supply and demand, right? So when you look at all fiat currencies, they go up and down depending, and that's usually depending on how much of the economy needs or is using that specific currency, and that still reigns the same for Bitcoin, right? Although we think Bitcoin is replacing a market, it's still a currency in and of itself and will be priced against other assets depending on the need or use of it.
Yeah, it's how you value it too. So obviously the saying is one BTC is one PTC. If you are measuring it in fiat terms, yes, it is volatile, because that's one of the big things, obviously. Oh, it's so volatile. It's so volatile. Like I see that as like one of the big fiat arguments. We talk about that a lot. And here's my thing. Here's my new, I guess, fairly new answer or whatever. But it's like, if you hold the dollar, it's not very volatile, right? But guess what? There's a death by a trillion cuts. I say the word trillion because of the money supply that was increased by almost 40% last year. So you don't feel it. You don't feel that you're losing your purchasing power by holding dollars because someone's not walking up to you and showing you that, hey, every year you're losing X amount of purchasing power every year. So I would rather to hold something just because Bitcoin's volatile. Volatile doesn't mean negative. It also means positive. It could be positive for you as far as your purchasing power long term, right? So volatile means up and down, right? But people like to say, oh, it's too volatile. People can't handle it and things like that. But over the long term, if you've held Bitcoin, you've protected your purchasing power over the long term, right? And when you say volatile, you then have to look at Bitcoin in fiat terms. If you don't look at it in fiat terms, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I think volatility is kind of just a function of price discovery, right? With every asset, there's a price discovery phase. Even within equities, right? Like they go through this price discovery phase until people have agreed on what the price of a specific stock or the multiple of that stock should be, right? And so
quick example: Amazon goes from $2.98 to $104 in 2000, then back down to $5 in 2002 or 2003. That's a tangible example. I try to bring up Amazon quite a bit because people know what Amazon is, but that's exactly what Amazon went through.
Yep. And so you go through this price discovery phase with almost any asset. And this happened with gold too, right? It's not like this is independent of gold. They say, oh, gold is a stable currency. Well, it took years for gold to get there, and Bitcoin will take time to get there too. But in terms of purchasing power, what makes Bitcoin so great is the fixed cap monetary policy, right? What makes a currency great is predictable monetary policy. What's predictable about Bitcoin is we know today, tomorrow, 10, 15, 20 years from now, there's only going to be 21 million of these things, right? So that's super, super incredible.
Yeah, it's the only asset in the world that's absolutely scarce. And I'm shocked more people don't talk about that. It's absolutely scarce with 21 million.
Yep.
It's like the most basic thing about Bitcoin and the most important thing to understand about Bitcoin is the 21 million aspect. I think everything else kind of follows after that because absolute scarcity doesn't exist. Gold is not absolutely scarce.
Correct. It's 2% inflation every year on gold.
Exactly. It's relatively scarce. So people throw the scarce word out for gold, but it's not absolutely scarce. So I think everything filters down. If someone's really trying, because I have a lot of people kind of reaching out in some comments and things like that. They're trying to wrap their head around Bitcoin. And every 4 years, this is kind of what happens with the halving, and it brings newer entrants in. And you start with the 21 million, and I think everything else lines up after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you try to wrap your head around Bitcoin, it's a lot about, okay, what is money, right? I mean, throughout history, we've had a few different currencies, the Yap stones, slave beads, and then eventually metals, right? And then now we have kind of this fiat money era, right? And so what money is to me is simply just liquidity between goods and services, right? I don't think we've ventured that far from the barter system. It's only that we've put something in between to be able to transact from one place to the other, right? And the demand of money is relative to how many goods and services can be purchased with that money, or like how often or how globally it is used, right? So this directly relates to Metcalfe's law. There's more cell phones, there's more people on the internet, right? It grows kind of the value of the people on the internet. And so you're essentially creating an ecosystem to use that money. And I think that when you think about Bitcoin and versus fiat money, right? Bitcoin has a hard cap, right? I don't think money is any different than monopoly money or Chuck E. Cheese tokens, to be honest. But the thing is there's only 21 million Bitcoin, while monopoly money just continues to grow, right? And so does the fiat standard, right? And it's pretty incredible. Like since 1970, we've been able to get away with it because we've made it the petrodollar. We've used it as the reserve currency, just dumping our US dollars onto other countries. But when they realize there's an opportunity for better settlement without giving the US all that power, I think a lot of emerging countries will move to Bitcoin, which you're already seeing with El Salvador.
Exactly. Lightning Network, peer-to-peer transactions, and not getting into Lightning Network quite yet, because I'd want to shift actually to your article, Time Preservation in Bitcoin.
Yep.
You wrote this a couple months ago. I've put it I put it in YouTube and one of the other chats. I want to make sure I get on LinkedIn too. But I want to read what you wrote there. There's a couple sentences, but I think this is really important. We'll talk about it a little bit. But I think near the beginning, you said the ultimate resource of the world is time. The time you spend on this earth is limited. The average life expectancy is 78 years. By the age of 22, we are thrown to corporate where we sell our time from 9 to 5 every day. The average citizen works and saves every penny in the hopes to be financially independent. We work hard, spend time away from those we love, pay taxes, yet the government steals the value of our time through inflation. Each hour you spend working becomes worth less in the future. Your time is being stolen by the government. By preserving your time in Bitcoin, you can store it generation over generation with provably no deterioration.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think about Bitcoin as the return of the American dream, right? You look at the 1950s and kind of this beautiful era of where you would go out and work, right? You'd save money, you'd earn interest on that money, and that was kind of the path to wealth in America, right? What's happened now is that under this inflationary fiat currency of the US dollar, we've forced Main Street to play Wall Street's game, right? We've forced Main Street to become over financialized. And that's kind of what you see on Robinhood and kind of these Wall Street bets, right? It's like all of a sudden, Main Street needs to start buying stocks because it's the only inflationary resistant asset that they have access to, right? And it's just it's literally like a clown show over at Wall Street. I can't stand it, right?
Yeah, it pushes you out on the risk curve. We talk about that a lot. And it's interesting because 2020 brought the awareness to the general public when they went on 60 Minutes, and I forgot his name, and the guy said we can print as much as we want. You know what I'm saying? When someone said but they've never done that before. They never went on 60 Minutes and said we can print as much as we want and looked them straight in the eye. And said, well, we can do that. I think once that happened, like people that really didn't follow the money supply and M2 and all this stuff, they're like, oh, that dude just said they can print forever.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Like, I'm seriously. I mean, I know it sounds silly and I'm probably maybe over the top a little bit, but part of me is like, nah, I'm not over the top. Like when people heard that guy say that, do you know how impactful that was?
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous that we've entered this modern monetary theory era where it's just like we can print as much as we want. No one gives a shit. No one really cares. And I think in part of that is because like I truly believe inflation creates more inequality within society. Because you look at the equity holders, they're all the rich people. It's Wall Street. It's the people that are plugged in politics. And they know as long as they continue to print money, the valuations on their stocks will continue to go up, in turn making them more money, right? You look at the average PE on any equity from like literally the 20s until 1970, the average price to earnings in the S&P never went above 25, ever. Today, we look at an average PE ratio of 34 times. That is ridiculous, right? And when you look at tech stocks, specifically software, their ability to create revenue without being capital intensive is a lot better. But I mean, you look at Roku 500 times earnings, Square 200 times earnings, and there's this saying now, especially within a lot of the VCs in Wall Street, if your company has earnings, you're probably too late to own it. Right. So it's the textbook definition of being pushed out on the risk curve farther and farther. Right. And it's just like our multiples have been increasing. And when you think about hard asset inflation, right, I think about equities as somewhat hard assets and their valuations are just skyrocketing.
Yes, let me ask you a quick question. So what in the world has happened to gold? Like the last year, like if gold bugs could have had this, in 2020, in like January 2020, if you could have created this fantasy world for gold bugs to make it, to make gold go to the moon and everything else, it would have been exactly what happened in 2020. Literally, this has been the perfect environment for gold, and it's down.
Yeah.
Like, I have my thoughts, but what are your thoughts on what is happening? What's happened with gold?
Yeah, so I think gold is like a very interesting asset, right? I'm like for people to understand it as money, it takes some time to get there.
Mhm.
When people think about gold, they immediately think jewelry, right? Oh, like I buy gold to, like, I don't know, wear a chain, right? Like I'm wearing my dad's chain right now, right? Like it's just like with gold, I think that what you're going to see is that there are certain properties of gold that just are not really comparable to Bitcoin. And when you think about Bitcoin and what it offers, it's going to steal market share, not from just gold, which is what Goldman has told us, but from adjacent technologies, right? So you look at Fedwire, Swift, money settlement places, right? We will steal market share from every single industry that is just around us. And you see this with every new emerging technology, right? You look at iPhones. Think about what's on your iPhone. It's not only a phone, a social media for the internet, right? You have a camera, right? It's all of these technologies have now combined into one. And that's what Bitcoin is doing. It's taking transaction settlement. It's taking the store of value proposition. It's taking Fedwire and Swift, right? And just all of these different technologies are now combining and becoming the wave of Bitcoin, right? So I do agree with you. And I actually have seen a lot of your content on this, is that Bitcoin is actively stealing market share from gold, right? Like, why wouldn't you use Bitcoin if you have 10-minute settlement instead of having to carry a brick across, like across the ocean? If I have to send money to India, why am I waiting 3 days for settlement, right? It's just ridiculous. And so all of these different technologies are going to come into Bitcoin, and you'll see just hyper growth in Bitcoin in just different places. I mean, new technology always eats adjacent technologies.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do as much as I can, especially the last, I don't know, I think like the last 3 or 4 months, I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can about Lightning, literally, because the more you learn about it, the more like aha moments and the more light bulbs go off in your head. Like, wow, like this is. I'm just looking at it earlier today, just because I'm running my own Lightning node. I've got a couple new peers that I'm connected to. That's the infrastructure of the new world of transacting with people. And I've said that, and there's some people like, "What are you talking about?" Like, it really is. It's like basically it's going to Manhattan in 1850 and grabbing, plots on Manhattan.
Yeah.
But it's like the digital version on Lightning, so that you can route payments and connect with peers. And again, I don't know everything about this. I'm not an Alex Bosworth. I'm not, Desiree Dickerson from Lightning Labs, and I'm not like them, right? I'm just trying to learn. I'm not trying to learn. Right. Yeah. But it's, I can see enough of it. I think once you see enough of something, you hit an inflection point and you're like, oh, okay. Right. Similar to, I mean, that's very similar. Like that's VC investing, it's, you hit it, you see an inflection or something about a founder or something. And then you learn more about them or their team or what they're building. This is the same thing with Bitcoin that's being built on like the second layer, second stack on Lightning. And then like understanding, like connecting peer to peer. And it goes back to the white paper as a peer-to-peer electronic cash. Right, it's almost like this, this reinforcing moment for Bitcoin. I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, so you talk about VCs and like just seeing a kernel, and I forget who I was talking to. I was like, I dream like for like 60% of the day, and then I spend the next 40 trying to make that dream happen. Right? It's just like, and that's what VCs do. They kind of envision a future and they kind of build it out. Right, and it's pretty cool to see. Right. So on the topic of Lightning, right, it's incredible, right? What Ryan Gentry and kind of the Lightning Labs is building out. You've seen an increase in nodes, which is incredibly important for Lightning, and you're seeing exponential growth in the amount of BTC that's being spent in channels. And for anyone that hasn't used Lightning before, I do love Strike, but I think an easier way of envisioning it from the Bitcoiner's perspective is to download Moon Wallet, MUUN wallet, transfer like, I don't know, like $20 Bitcoin in there, and then try sending a friend like $1 or $2 in Bitcoin. And it's incredible. It literally is instant. It goes through super fast. You see it in Bitcoin terms, which makes it really easy. And I'm paying like, I don't know, like 9 sats for a transaction.
And it's on-chain and off-chain wallet hybrid. Correct. It's really cool. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I highly suggest Moon Wallet. And you think about Lightning wallets and what they can do for settlement in countries that don't have payment infrastructure. it's incredible, right? Like you look at what Strike is building out for El Salvador. Essentially, the currency is floating however long it takes for Lightning to settle on chain. But I mean, that's minimal loss for having a payment infrastructure that helps people like use money in a place where there isn't a lot of payments companies. In the US, we're generally spoiled, right? The best currency, the best payment infrastructure, the best like goods and services, right? And we don't really see how people settle money in other countries, and it's extremely poor. Like it's just not usable, right? And I think there was another question in the chat. It's how would Strike making buying Bitcoin for free affect your business? It has zero effect on our business. At Unchained, we don't sell you Bitcoin, right? What we focus on is the custody side of Bitcoin. What you'll see is Casa recently rolled out their DCA, so their dollar cost averaging on their app, and then you eventually move it into your multi-sig wallet. But what I highly suggest is if you are DCAing and you are considering multi-sig, I would have a specific number of times that you're moving your DCA Bitcoin into your multi-sig wallet, because what you'll do is you'll overload the UTXOs in your multi-sig wallet, and it'll become really expensive to send transactions. So Casa, and I think Andrew Yang touched upon this. It's what you want to do when you're buying Bitcoin is buy on an exchange until it gets to an amount that you're just a little uncertain about holding on an exchange, and then you move it over to a multi-sig wallet. So we focus specifically on custody and Bitcoin-backed loans, which are only available at 40% LTC with a $10,000 minimum. And then we focus on OTC trades, which is over $50,000. So we specifically service clients that are moving a lot more money and not really focused on payments like Strike is, or DCA like Strike is.
I want to get to the loan aspect because I've talked about this several times, but it's no different to me than real estate investors. So some people that are kind of in the comments sometimes of some of the articles and things I post, they say real estate's better than Bitcoin, and they have all these reasons and things like that. But it's very similar to real estate. If you understand real estate, you actually have some understanding of Bitcoin, in my opinion, because once you own the asset, you don't have to sell it. Just like Saylor said, like if you own plots in Manhattan from 1900, did those people sell those plots? Of course not. They didn't. It's a pristine asset, right? So they're not going to sell it. You borrow against it, or you lease it out. It has utility. There's things you can do with the fact that you own the asset, right? But it's just been the past couple of years that these services have been built for Bitcoin, right? And that's obviously part of what Unchained is doing. So then it gives you the optionality of not having to liquidate your Bitcoin. It gives you the optionality to then just like with a real estate investment, refinance and things like that. So because you have like that built-in equity. So that's just important to bring up because that's just going to continue. And I think it was California or somewhere that the first mortgage, they used their assets in Bitcoin to get a loan for a mortgage or something like that. Yeah. Or I wish I had the article to it. So it's going to be acknowledged now that Bitcoin's an asset, and then that's going to be seen as a value to then get a loan off of, for like a mortgage or whatever. So that's going to start to happen more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Right. When you think about assets and kind of money, or borrowing money against it, you look at these big corporations, and what they do is they borrow against their equity. Right. Mm-hmm. And they borrow against their equity at virtually 0% because banks are just slobbering at the mouth to give away money. Right. So Apple, Amazon, Facebook, they essentially get money from banks for free, 0% for 60 months because their equity is just worth that much. Right. So that's essentially what borrowing against your asset looks like. You look at homes, right? For real estate, you have something called home equity lines. Right. So as you build equity within your home, you can borrow against it, and then you can buy another house or just keep levering up like that, right? So it's interesting because as you build equity, you can always borrow against it. And that's what Unchained truly is predicated on, is that as the value of Bitcoin goes up, you can borrow against it without having to liquidate if you need cash flows in the short term to buy a house, to do whatever you need to, right? And it's it's incredibly important that you do have this avenue to go get money without having to sell Bitcoin, because not only does it relieve sell pressure, but it also helps people not have to liquidate their asset and pay capital gains, which is incredibly, like, excruciatingly painful to do, right?
Yeah, I know the meme right now, the digital real estate meme, which has been hilarious, which has been hilarious on Twitter.
Yeah.
But but it's in a sense, right? It's digital real estate, and from being able to take the equity and refinance, and then there's tax implications, right? So there's tax incentives, to not have to pay cap gains and things like that. But everyone's situation is different. Again, this is not advocating for people to run out and go do this just because they're hearing it on a conversation, but it's something, it's a tool or utility that you can use potentially. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So if we had any other questions, feel free to jump in. We've got about another 10 minutes. So thanks for all the questions beforehand. We will grab those and try to get those answered as soon as we can. I did have, we talked a little bit multi-sig. I did want to mention running your own node. I just want to throw it out there. I think everybody needs to run their own node, multiple nodes, learn about Lightning nodes. Like, just the more you learn about it, the more you can kind of see the future as to what Bitcoin is versus it's just an asset people hold. That's kind of the narrative still. It's like, oh, it's a financial asset. It's inflation resistant. It's a hedge. So we'll put 2% in or 1%, right? So I think it kind of went from 1% last year. Well, here's an example, like Paul Tudor Jones, like last year. It was like, yeah, it's a kind of a 1 to 2%, hedge, right, or whatever. Well, then guess what? Now he's at 5%. And if you know, Paul Tudor Jones is one of the most legendary investors ever.
Yeah, people don't realize how legendary of a trader Paul Tudor Jones is.
Yeah, right. So he goes from like 1%, like dipping your toe in, and then you kind of step down to like the next step in the pool, and now you're 5%. Then he's going to go to 10, 25, 50. Like, it's just a progression.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like the societal progression. And like, I love following what he's saying because that's what's happened like on a bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, you think about Cathie Wood, I believe, in ARK said that Bitcoin will essentially replace the bond market, right? Because the bond market today is just so broken. You don't really yield a lot of money, and these high yield junk bonds are just like are incredibly risky today, right? And so you think about the 60-40 split, like the traditional split of what like portfolios used to be, that's been withered down to like 80-20, 80-10. And I think that bond side of traditional portfolios will eventually turn to Bitcoin. And I mean, unfortunately, today it's not possible to get really real exposure in the financial markets, which is why Gary Gensler and the ETF is super, super important, because there's no fiduciary responsibility for a lot of these asset managers to have to tell their clients or inform them about Bitcoin today, right? They have no responsibility to do that. The thing is as soon as an ETF is approved, not only is each ETF share equivalent to a specific amount of Bitcoin, but asset managers, even managing small retirement funds, have to start now advising about it. This forces them to learn about it and read about it, and eventually they'll fall down the trap too. And
you mentioned education earlier. There you go. There's your education bridge. The education bridge, partly, like especially in the US, is from your asset manager, right? Yeah. So if they're forced to learn about it because there's an ETF that the client says, hey, why isn't this in my portfolio? Yeah. They looked at, well, why isn't this in my portfolio? And they're like, oh, I guess I have to tell you now because there's an ETF for it, right? So that's what happens. And look, and you go back to look at what happened when gold hit the first ETF for gold hit the market. Go look what happened then. I'm not saying exactly what's going to happen now, but we've got some historical context on that. But and I think it's mentioned quite a bit, but not enough, of like trillions of dollars assets under management, with these firms, that once they're having to comply, like once there is an ETF, that's that bridge that now they have to educate and then put it in their portfolio models, and to be able to have a conversation lasting more than 2 sentences. Sorry, I get on this rant about asset managers and stuff like that on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn it's terrible. Like, I mean, the threads on this, it's hilarious because they're threatened. They are absolutely threatened. But don't be threatened. Learn. Yeah. Don't be threatened by it. Just learn about it. Like, I don't get it. But because there is no ETF, they don't have to learn about it. So they don't give a rip until the ETF comes. And guess when the ETF comes, they're going to want to learn every single detail about it because it's going to be a threat to their business because the other shop over there does it.
Yeah,
I guarantee you it's what's going to happen. And they're very much a trend followers. Like if something happens, like, oh, we got to go, like if the ETF comes, they're going to be chasing around trying to figure it out. I'm just telling you how it's going to happen. I've got a lot of contacts in space, right? But it doesn't quite matter right now because it can't be put into models.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, most of Wall Street is generally scared of Bitcoin and kind of what it proposes, because you think about inflation, increase in multiples, they just continue to raise their multiple estimations, and they just continue to do so because there's more money in the economy. With Bitcoin, it kind of brings them back, and it's just so different that you're forcing them to learn, and Wall Street doesn't like to learn. They just want to tell, right? And that's just how they are. I genuinely hate the people that work on Wall Street. It's just a fraternized bullshit place, right? It's awful.
So we'll see how that plays out. I'm really curious. You mentioned Gensler. I'm really, I'm not curious. I mean, I look, we know what's going to happen. Come on.
Yeah.
There's unregistered securities everywhere in this space. They're going to get smashed. Yeah. That's my expert opinion on what's going to happen. They're going to get destroyed because there's unregistered securities everywhere. And we've been saying this forever. Like people have been saying this forever, and everyone's known there's unregistered securities, but they're going to get absolutely destroyed. So sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, people get mad at me for saying that, but
I mean, I still
Bitcoin's not obviously, but
yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is of course not. And I still have friends that ask me about Ripple. I'm like, dude, they literally already have a case about being a security. Like this is just, it's so painful sometimes. To answer Badir's question here, we
have a question real quick. Go ahead. Yeah.
Services overseas? Unfortunately, we do not, Badir. There's a lot of restrictions with crypto in a lot of different countries, and kind of and like being able to use it, KYC right now. So unfortunately, we do not offer Bitcoin backed loans. There's actually a lot of states in the US that we don't even offer it in, because you look at New York with their Crypto Act or their Digital Asset Act, like we're not even allowed to offer services there, right? Multi-sig though, you can use anywhere, right? You hop on Unchained, you want to store your Bitcoin with us, that's totally fine. All you need is 2 wallets and you can hop on, or if you even want to hop on a concierge call, we're happy to do that. We actually, I'll mention this again about our concierge team, is that we don't make any money on the concierge team. It's actually sheer loss. We offer our base package if you bring both your wallets for $1,250, and we give you $1,000 worth of Bitcoin with it, right? So $250, and we employ maybe like 3 or 4 people on this team. So it's a complete consumer acquisition team. Like we just focus on bringing people into multi-sig and Bitcoin and just kind of learning about it from there.
All right, I'll let you take this one. This is a good one. Joe on YouTube. Do you see BTC as the only real crypto to invest in, or would you suggest any others?
So I think I come from a place of a lot of Bitcoin maximalists, or people that only believe in Bitcoin. But I think when you look at other currencies, right, there's decentralization trade-offs, which they're kind of being given. And this is where you kind of assess which side of the line you want to be on, right? So when we think about blockchains, right, they're no different from regular databases, right? A centralized database, which is what corporations use, store their own data. They use redundancy for safety, and that redundancy is delivered in the form of more nodes that are saving that data in separate geographic places, right? But they have access to all of those nodes, right? When you think about blockchains, right, there's pretty much this trilemma, which I think a lot of people have kind of touched upon, but you have scalability, security, and decentralization. And you can really only get 2 of the 3. With scalability, you need less nodes, faster blocks, more specialized equipment, right? Which is kind of what ETH is shooting for here as they move from proof of work to proof of stake. With security, you need slower blocks, more consensus, and more nodes and more copies, which is essentially just more redundancy, slower blocks, which prevents hard forks, and more consensus. With decentralization, you want as many nodes as possible, right? And that's what Bitcoin really brings. We optimize for security and decentralization because we have a fixed monetary policy that we want to employ through security and decentralization. Bitcoin today on layer 1 does not care about scalability, unlike some other chains, right? ETH, on the other hand, is trying to achieve transactional speed. So in order to do that, again, they're going from proof of work to proof of stake, and that kind of limits the number of nodes that are on the Ethereum chain, right? So you look at other smart contract platforms like Solana, and ETH pretty much saw that, okay, they're not running that many nodes, and that's why they're kind of cutting down the number of nodes that they have, because they believe there's marginal utility in the number of nodes that you have for decentralization. That's what they believe, right? I'm simply putting out the argument for a lot of people to understand, right? For me, when I think about money and where I want to store it, I want it to be as decentralized and as secure as possible, right? And use Bitcoin for that, because I know there's only 21 million Bitcoin. I have no idea how many Ether there are going to be, right? 2 ETH per block. Today, I think 1559 went live, and there's going to be some amount of burn, but the best monetary policy is always predictable. With ETH, it's not predictable today, right? And that's why I don't suggest it as a form of money, right? And so it's funny, even with ETH, with their ETH2 transition, which is their move from proof of work to proof of stake, there are a lot of hurdles. And I have a short little article on this about kind of the hurdles that ETH2 has when running a node, right? You need to stake 32 ETH. There's a validator queue. There's equipment requirements. So you think about Bitcoin today, you can get a Raspberry Pi for about $200. You could even run a Bitcoin node on your laptop if you really wanted to. For ETH2, you need to have at least $1,000 like piece of equipment to run an ETH node, right? So there are trade-offs here and there, right? ETH is going for scalability. Well, Bitcoin doesn't really care because we believe it'll be built through different layers, like Lightning is something that we're talking about today, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to sum it up. There's multiple ways to look at it. I mean, because we got to kind of wrap up here, but you can look at it more like in the short term. If you're thinking more of like a VC and short term, you're looking at everything else, outside of Bitcoin. Like you're doing this circus, like figure out, put this fund together and put all these things together to try to outperform and and all these little baskets. And I know people will get upset for me saying that, but it is what it is. I'm more concerned with money and having the best money for myself, my kids, grandkids, and based on monetary policy, based on what Bitcoin actually is, what the protocol is, being able to verify, running a node and be able to verify the supply. You can't do that with anything else. You can't do that. You can't do what you can do with Bitcoin being and as decentralized as it is. It is the only money that is decentralized to that extent. So to me, that's what I'm most interested in. And what's really fun, what's really interesting, the more time you spend around because initially it's very overwhelming. There's so much stuff in the space, and I think you kind of get real generalized looking at everything, but then you really need to get focused. You need to get focused. And the other thing too is this is why I bring about Lightning a lot. Once you start learning about Lightning, light bulbs, I'm telling you, start going off, and you're like, oh, Bitcoin's solving this. And I know it's a meme, but Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin solves it. That's what's happening. It's going to make everything else mean nothing long term. And I'm not saying tomorrow, yeah, sure. In the medium term, really anything can happen. Everybody knows that. And I'm not predicting what this will do or that'll do. And, but I'm saying decade plus, everything is being built on top of Bitcoin will make, in my opinion, it will make everything obsolete. That's just my opinion. People get mad at me when I say that, but that's just how I see it. And then you align yourself with what you believe. Right. I mean, I know it sounds very basic.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's very basic, right? I think it makes sense. As you fall down the rabbit hole, you'll realize ETH and a lot of these other currencies are offering just ridiculous amounts of changes and changes to the protocol, and these L1 tokens are all kind of trash, right? And to me, Bitcoin is so simplistic and easy to understand that it will relate to more people than what ETH does today, right? At least from my perspective of money, right? So I mean, today, I think Bitcoin is probably the most sure bet within crypto, right? That's why I work at a Bitcoin company. I believe in Bitcoin more than I believe just about any other currency today. That being said, I don't know the future, but I know Bitcoin, I'm certain of just one thing, and that there's going to be only 21 million Bitcoin for the rest of our lives, right? That's pretty much the only thing that I know.
Yeah, to go full circle, you start with 21 million and then you end with 21 million.
Yep.
Right. You know what I'm saying? And then
Yeah.
that you just always go back to that. And then everything kind of is cyclical around that. I think it's really important. It kind of creates this little cycle in your head. Like whenever you get confused or whatever, just go back to 21 million. And nothing else is like that in the world. So,
Yeah.
actually, it's probably a good way to end too. So,
Yeah.
probably in the podcast on 21 million. So, well, what I did, I made sure I posted your blog stuff across multiple platforms. So some people come in and watch the replays. I'll try to pin everything on every platform so you can get to some of the articles, especially read time preservation in Bitcoin. That was what I read from earlier. So Drew, that was really cool. And yeah, learn more about Unchained Capital. I'll put Unchained's information in the pinned tweets, and on it. We'll make a thread out of this too on Twitter. What I'd like to do is go back and make a thread of the conversation and how things went. So if you're on Twitter, kind of seeing this for the first time, go look at that thread. And I'm at the Level Up EXP. And then how can people get a hold of you, man?
Yeah. So if anyone has any questions about Bitcoin, multi-sig, just kind of the space as a whole, I'm super, super open to having any questions in my DMs at Dhruv, DHRUVBS on Twitter. You can also reach me at Unchained, first name, last name, DHRUVSHAH at Unchained Capital. And at unchained.com is the email. So I mean, just look out for me. If you have any questions, I'm willing to answer. And as Chris said, that we're a super open community to answering any questions. You reach out to Chris or me, we will always answer questions and kind of guide you in the right way.
Yeah, if anybody's got a Lightning channel that wants to pair with me, let me know. I'm trying to show my Lightning channels to get some liquidity going. So I got to show my Lightning node. So
that's awesome.
All right, man. Well, take care, dude. We'll have to bring you on here pretty soon.
Absolutely. I'll definitely be around. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Thanks everyone. Thanks for all the questions.